So, guys, at the minute we have Vinai Kopp that will be actually taking us through Hyva Themes. His call was pre-recorded due to reception issues, but I know it's something that you guys have been looking forward to. So I want to make sure that you get enough time to go through that as well. Once again, over to Vinai.
Welcome. Thank you. I'm honored to be here. Thanks for being interested in the topic that I'm talking about, Hyvä from a developer's perspective. So first little primer about me. I've been working with Magento for a long time, since 2008, right? And for the longest time, it was a great ride until about 2016 or 17, maybe. I was becoming more and more frustrated and disillusioned with how Magento was going, how it was being developed, and so on. So for a while, I felt kind of relieved after community engineering got introduced as a big department within Magento development. But yeah, that didn't quite work out with the whole point system. Some of the community spirit was missing. And to be honest, it almost felt a bit like, okay, I'm working with Magento because it's good money and I know it very well and I love the people in the ecosystem and have great relationships there, but it didn't really feel like a long-term viable solution. So I started looking around like so many others did and are doing, until last October. Back then, my good friend Willem Wigman gave a presentation at Reacticon, and I watched it after the fact on YouTube, maybe like you're watching this presentation right now. And there he presented Hyvä, his new front end for Magento 2. And I must admit, it kind of blew my mind, because what he was saying sounded really sensible. I really could relate to it. And I decided to give it a try and not just sit this one out, because it didn't just sound like the usual marketing fad. So yeah, I took a look and fell in love again. So ever since then, I've really come to enjoy working with Magento again and believe it's got a bright future ahead of itself. So freshly in love again. Hyvä saved my relationship. Yay! Right. Very good. So I have to admit, though, there's a bit of bias here. I'm sold on Hyvä. I really want you to join the train too and get on board. So far, when I've been giving presentations about Magento, they've always been technical presentations. So I could speak freely about Magento because I didn't build Magento, they did, right? It was easy to talk about something somebody else did. I wasn't invested in Magento. Of course, I wanted to sell my services, consulting, training, development work, but I didn't want to sell you Magento, because probably since you were looking at a talk of mine, you already were sold on Magento. Now I'm in this new situation that I'm slightly unfamiliar with. I want you to really get into Hyvä too. And to be honest, I never would have joined this much into this whole idea if I weren't seriously, totally convinced this is a wonderful solution. This is exactly what Magento needs, and it's great. So anyway, just keep that in mind. Part of me really wants to sell you Hyvä. And at the same time, I also want to give a talk that you get a lot of value out of. So I'm trying to give an objective talk. So even if you end up not using Hyvä for some reason, then at least you can base your decision on some good objective information. Right? That's actually my own, that's what I want to give you here. So for those of you who might not be familiar with Hyvä yet, right? A little primer first. Hyvä is a brand new front end for Magento 2. And it offers the best dev experience, performance, and time to market. So that's Hyvä's claim. And so it's a front-end theme for Magento 2, but it's a theme unlike any other theme for Magento that you know. First of all, the idea that Willem had when he built this theme was, after years of working with the Magento to Luma-based front end and also PWA-based front ends, he felt like, I don't really want to continue doing that. So he started ripping out all the parts that he didn't like. So all the JavaScript stack that's used on the standard front end Magento stack and Luma, right? No more jQuery, no more knockout, no more UI components, no more require.js, all of that gone, right? Which also meant much, by slow deployments and a lot of the complexity of the front end work, which is kind of fun as a developer, but kind of bad in the results that it creates, all that gone. And most importantly for Willem at the time was no more wasted time trying to optimize this old obsolete front end, right? So he wrote a white paper on Magento 2 front end optimization. He really took it quite far. He put in great effort, and a lot of the current tools like Webpack and Magepack and so on are partially based on his work. So, he knows what he's talking about, and he felt like that can't be the future, having to put in weeks of work just to get something okay, just to make something okay, good enough. We want something better. We deserve something better. So that's why he created Hyvä. And it's built with HTML5, Tailwind CSS, and Alpine. So this makes for a very small, sharp, performant, and fun stack to use. It's super fast. It is a commercial product. It costs a 1,000 euro license fee, but to be honest, given what you get for it, it's a bargain, because it doesn't only give you a license, and that license is for basically one instance of Magento, right? It could be multiple store views or websites, as long as it's running on one instance, that's the fee for it, and it's a lifetime fee, a lifetime upgrade there. But in addition to this, you also get the trust, and that's actually the most important part, why I think that it's that it's important that it's a commercial product and not a free open source theme for Magento. It's about, as a merchant, if I get a build based on Hyvä, I can trust that there's a commercial entity, people's lives are built around it, that will continue developing Hyvä, that will maintain it, there's long-term support, all these factors that really justify any kind of investment. And with that background, 1,000 euro already looks like it's not that much. Plus, there's also access to the community. Currently, that's mainly in the form of a private Slack. So you get access there, there's support there's a lot of documentation you get access to once you have a license. You get support there, you get lifelong upgrades, you get access to any compatibility modules. So there's a lot there. And yeah, all of that greatly outweighs this price, by the way. At least that's my opinion. Yeah, you'll have to decide yourself, of course. So now that you know what Hyvä is, I can take off my sales hat here and put on my developer hat and talk to you from a more technical perspective. So I've mainly been a backend developer the last couple of years, and that's new, because before that I was doing pretty much anything, but I didn't really want to work with a Magento 2 frontend. I found it a bit frustrating. I felt familiar with the JavaScript part, and I know JavaScript well, so that's not a problem. But I didn't really enjoy the experience of theming Magento 2, so I haven't been doing that a lot. So for me right now, starting with Hyvä as a front end, I'm basically relearning how to do this. And since Hyvä is built with Tailwind CSS, that's what I'm learning. And at the moment, I'm still learning. I feel proficient, I get stuff done, but to be honest, I'm not really fast. But still, it's okay, I'm enjoying it. So this was a chance for me to really catch up with everything that happened during the last couple of years in regards to CSS. And I have to say, it's actually pretty much like CSS. So anybody who knows CSS will feel very much at home very quickly with Tailwind CSS. Me being a bit of a foreigner to CSS when I started out beginning of the year, it took me a little while, but now I feel much more confident. So Tailwind CSS is a utility-based framework, a CSS framework. You use utility classes. Not everybody is a fan of utility CSS classes. To be honest, because I'm not a mainly front-end dev, I don't really have an opinion on that. All I can say is it works well. So I can build, I can style anything on a site, and the CSS bundle size doesn't grow while I'm doing it, or only it stays small, basically. It might grow a very little bit, but not very much. So it does its job, it works, and that's great. The second thing that Hyvä introduces in the front-end stack is Alpine.js. So Alpine.js is a very minimal, lightweight JavaScript library. It's syntactically, it's close to Vue. So if you know Vue, you'll feel right at home. In fact, I bet you will feel right at home anyway, because even if you know React, or if you know Knockout.js, right? It's not that different, to be honest. So I spent about an hour reading the docs. It's just a README, or it used to be just a README on GitHub. Now they've got their own dedicated site, but it's pretty quick to read it. And after that, it took me about an hour of working with Alpine, and I felt right at home. So it's so simple. It really doesn't get in one's way. It still surprises me how simple it is to get stuff done. So it's really good. So Hyvä is built on Alpine.js version 2. Where version 3 just got released a few weeks ago. So Hyvä will be upgraded pretty soon, but it hasn't been yet. We want to really make sure that it doesn't impact performance negatively going to version 3. So yeah. But pretty soon, I guess it'll only be a question of 1 or 2 weeks until Hyvä is in a state where the upgrade to version 3 could be done by anybody who wants to, but we'll see when version 3 is bundled by default with Hyvä. Anyway, I want to give you an impression of how my day-to-day work with Hyvä looks as a developer, right? So most of the Magento sites that I work on, actually all of them, they use third-party modules. That's one of the great things around the Magento ecosystem. We all use them. Every merchant uses them. You know, we get these great functionality bundled in. Now, the big problem here, of course, is that the front-end bits of these third-party modules are built for Luma. So that doesn't work on Hyvä. And the solution that Hyvä introduces for this problem are compatibility modules. Compatibility modules are very small, thin modules that just replace the templates from these third-party modules with Hyvä compatible ones. So there's a process actually to converting these existing Luma templates to Hyvä. In a way, it's almost what Willem did when he built Hyvä from scratch with the standard Magento Luma, right? We will have to do the same thing just for the third-party modules. So the idea around these compatibility modules is most shops use a similar subset of third-party modules. Some third-party modules are used by, I guess, 80% of all Magento instances, and others are used by fewer. So instead of everybody doing the same work again and again and again for their own customers, let's share. You know, once somebody has created a compatibility module, it can be shared and just used by others, which means that module, you can just use it. And if you find maybe that one of the compatibility modules doesn't exist yet, well, maybe you can find somebody who also needs it, and you can collaborate on it. Right? So let's work together to make as many modules as possible, all that are needed, available for Hyvä. There's a compatibility module tracker on hyvä.github.io. And each of these issues there represents a module. And we have modules that have just been requested. And you can vote on them. And then some are accepted, so highly sought after modules we might convert ourselves. Or you might find somebody else who's already working on them, and then they get switched to in progress. And once a compatibility module exists, you can find those under published with a publish tag on them, or some modules actually are compatible out of the box. either because they don't really use the front end, then of course it's a no-brainer, but more and more third-party extension vendors are starting to support Hyvä natively or publishing their own compatibility module. So that's great. And I hope to see more and more of those. Basically, these extension vendors are getting more and more requests from their customers if they support Hyvä. So, that's a big indication. The bigger extension vendors, of course, for them, it will be a bigger investment. So they're holding back so far, but I guess it's just a question of time until they will go along too. Right. By the way, these issues contain, if you look into one of these tickets, you will see which features of a module actually have been made compatible with Hyvä. It might be all of them, or it might just be a subset. So in that case, if you need one of the missing features, you can either implement it yourself based on the existing work, or you can work with the original author maybe and get it done that way. All in all, compatibility modules are a great way to get work done quickly. Honestly, it's kind of fun building it. So the basic process is, once you have a skeleton compatibility module repository and there's a script, we can generate such a skeleton for you. All that it takes is copying over the templates, the front-end templates from the original module into the compatibility module. And the next thing I do is I inline all Magento init, datamage init, and require call. So all the JavaScript needs to go inline because we don't want to load as many external resources. And I also like to inline JavaScript knockout templates, so this remote templates.html templates, because by default, I like to use server-side rendering in PHTML. So far, I haven't found any reason for these client-side render templates to exist. They work, we can render them inline just as well, and it tends to be a lot quicker. And then finally, of course, I also need to port the JavaScript over to Alpine and to native JavaScript. And sometimes that just is very straightforward. Sometimes it's a bit more work. Sometimes it requires a Alpine view model. Then it's a bit like a jQuery widget or maybe a knockout component. Sometimes I can just use native JavaScript. That works surprisingly often without the need for any external libraries. And in the end, I usually end up with about a third of the original code. So just goes to show how much accidentally complexity always exists in these Luma-based modules. Well, and then there's another step, of course, which is instead of using the whole Magento to Luma less styling system, or maybe you're using something else like Sass and built on other solutions there, probably you want to also use Tailwind to style the templates. There, for the most part, I've been doing that manually, and that's how I've been learning Tailwind CSS. But I just recently found a great little module from this guy, Marcel, and I don't know how to pronounce his surname, Pokyot or Poshiot or something. I don't know whether it's pronounced German or French or whatever. So he's well-known in the Laravel community. He's a developer, and he's with the company Beyond Code, and he built a browser plugin for Chrome and Firefox called Windy. And what it does is you can copy, you can install the module, the extension. It costs 50 euros, so it's a commercial product. But what it allows you to do is, if you enable that extension, you can click on any part of the page and it will copy that outer HTML, right? So that node plus everything it contains. But in the copy, it automatically converted all the styles to Tailwind. So what I then do is I take that, copy that into a temporary document, and then just copy those styles into my PHTML template. So that's super useful when working with building compatibility modules there, because I have one store view with Luma. So there I can see the module, how it's supposed to be. And I have one store view with Hyvä, and that's where I can see the module that I'm currently building, those templates, right? So I can basically copy and paste this Tailwind classes over. And of course, well, it doesn't get me 100% there, but it gets me very close. So that's been a huge time saver. Windy from Beyond Code. Check it out if you want to build compatibility modules. It's awesome. There's also a lot of documentation about building compatibility modules and working with Hyvä on a technical level, with the JavaScript, with the styles, with the templates, anything of those things. There are helpers, like there's an automatic template override for compatibility modules that basically exists to get rid of a lot of the boilerplate layout XML. And you can also look at existing compatibility modules that you have access to once you have a Hyvä license. And of course, you can ask for support in Slack. So you're not on your own building these compatibility modules. Again, I find it's kind of fun building those actually. Okay, but of course, not everything is a module. There's also just regular theming. I find that to be relatively fast with the CSS classes. If you're familiar with CSS, I expect you to be much, much faster than I am. And what really helped me as a backend developer is that there's a huge amount of examples out there. Just Google Tailwind example for whatever modal or slider or whatever. You can find a ton of them and just copy and paste what you need and get an impression for how to build stuff. So that's been super helpful. It's used by so many people. It's amazing. One other interesting thing about this is that with Hyvä, Magento PHP's view models are used a lot. And what Hyvä does is it automatically injects a view model registry into each PHTML template while it's being rendered into the variable view models. And with the help of this class, we can instantiate any view model we might need in this template, right? Just by calling view models require and then the class name that we want, and it gives us the instance. So for example, if I want the current product, I can get the product page view model and call get product, and that gives me my product. They're a little bit like the old school view helpers. The only problem with these helpers were that they weren't only view helpers, they were used for all kinds of things, right? Just they were helpers, not just view helpers. And they've been written a long time ago, and a lot of them actually still are based on their Magento 1 versions. So they're kind of bloated and don't really follow current best practices. These view models are much smaller, much more granular, much more composable and reusable. So that makes them really handy. And it helps a lot when working with these in Hyvä themes. One very interesting thing about these view models is that's a Hyvä feature, is that they also can provide the cache tags for a page. That's something that doesn't work in standard Magento, but in Hyvä, we can provide, let's say we get the product collection or product or CMS page or whatever from a view model, then we can, it automatically will add the cache tags associated with those entities to the response. So the full page cache will be flushed whenever that entity is edited. Well, not the full page cache, just those records associated with that entity. Yeah, that's a Hyvä thing. Upcoming, well, there's Alpine version 3 coming up. That's very interesting. Then there's also a new feature in Tailwind, which is a JIT compiler, which means you don't have to work with a development build containing all Tailwind classes while you're styling a site, and then just for deployment, build a production build that only contains those Tailwind classes that you actually used. Instead, you can run the JIT compiler with a file watcher, and it automatically compiles the list of styles for the site on the fly. The reason why we haven't introduced that yet in Hyvä is because I really enjoy working with the Chrome developer tools, right? And there I just recently learned actually, there's this little tool where I can add new classes to elements, and it offers me everything that's available. It's really neat. So it's been super helpful, and I can use, just start typing, padding bottom, whatever, and then I can type through all the existing pad and bottom variants and immediately see how that would look if I choose that specific variant. And if I would use the JIT, then only the variants that I actually use would be offered because the others wouldn't be present in the CSS file. So the same Marcel guy who built Windy is also building a new plugin that will take care of that problem. But for now, well, you know, that's one of the downsides of the JIT. If you like working in Chrome DevTools for prototyping and then copying over the classes into your editor, that gets a little harder. There are some people who don't work that way, who work directly in VS Code or PHP Storm and don't use Chrome DevTools, and they are actually already using the JIT compiler with Hyvä too. So it really, you know, you can, if you know what you're doing, no problem. For me, I'm with CSS, I'm more like the guy, okay, what's on the menu? What can I use? You know, that's why I like to see what's there. For other people who know what's there, they can order exactly what they want without looking at the menu, and they can use the JIT perfectly. So also, we'll be building more compatibility modules. And the main product that Willem is intending to build is a UI component library. So in this context, there's this product the guys that created Tailwind CSS built called Tailwind UI. And it's a library of pre-built website components, beautifully styled, easy to customize. And if you have a license, you can pick any one of those elements and use them in your projects and customize them, of course. So now they just recently released a version of that specifically for e-commerce sites. And even with the Tailwind UI, working, you know, building styles was very fast. But with this e-commerce set of styles, pages themed for specific verticals, different add to carts and checkout styles, and so on, all that's there and it speeds up things even faster. And the idea of Willem is to build a UI component library that is already integrated into Magento. Because with the Tailwind CSS stuff, you will still have to attach it to the products that are in Magento, right? You have to iterate over your product collection or whatever and render them into the styles that have been supplied by the Tailwind UI library. But with the Hyvä UI component library, you will be able to simply take a PHTML template and just drop it into your theme and it will just work. If you want a different navigation, there you go. If you want a different slider, you have some choices there. So that will be that's coming up. That's actually work in progress. That's one of the next big things there. And there are also a number of other surprises that are being worked on. And yeah, I can't talk about them just yet, but good things are coming, many. And this kind of innovation that's happening there with the guys, the Tailwind CSS guys are doing, all the utilities that the Beyond Code guys are building, this kind of innovation that is happening in this Laravel, Alpine.js, Tailwind universe, being able to build on top of that and use that in the context of Magento, it's amazing because it really, I feel like it fuels the innovation juice in the Magento space again. That's something I haven't seen in a long time. Yeah, it's really fun. So the results, building with Hyvä is significantly reduced build times, first of all, which of course results in much more competitive build prices. So it's still hard for me to believe, but so far, everybody who has released a site has reported 30 to 50% time savings for building the front end. That's huge. That makes building sites on Magento really competitive again. Everybody that I've spoken to who's built a site and released it on Hyvä is planning to do a new one, or most actually already are doing more builds on Hyvä. And many have said we'll only build on Hyvä in future. So that's great. And the overall developer satisfaction is very high. To be frank, not everybody has fallen in love with utility CSS classes or Tailwind or Alpine, and that's fine. But at least it's okay, right? And many people actually do love it a lot. And most importantly, of course, the results are great. So this is the homepage and a product page of the demo installation of Hyvä on mobile. It's amazing. It's blazing fast. Google really likes it. And starting out from something like this, instead of starting out from something that's kind of okay, as long as it's not customized, makes a huge difference, because it's really easy to lose these ratings, right? It's just adding a library or large images or a third-party script or something can really make a big difference here. But getting back to this is so much easier, right? So just makes a huge difference. It's a lot more fun, to be honest, to build something that just works great. Okay, so thank you very much. This has been a recording. I'm recording this right now, but I hope to be online nevertheless. So if you have any questions, now's a great time. Okay. And image credits. Thanks, Unsplash.
Hey, thank you so much, Vinai. And oh, isn't technology beautiful? Like, you're in Tuscany, I think I hear, but I can see you in the chat answering all the questions that people have been posted for the Q&A section. So thanks again so much. It was like watching Mage TV again. I remember I used to be all up in Mage TV just watching Vinai talk and telling us and explaining us about all these fantastic ways that we can do build Magento.